Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kyivlab podcast. And today I would like to welcome Dmytro Pleshakov, founder and CEO of Osavul, an AI-powered information security startup. Hello.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Nice to see you as well. Tell me more what you do and what's unique about your approach.
All right, I'll start from myself a little bit. So I'm a tech entrepreneur with around 8 years of experience. We've been building startups with my partner for quite a while, mostly in the field of the AI and the intersection of the AI and data analytics, data science. My past startup got acquired in 2019. So after that, I've been working for a public company which acquired us, and I've been building an AI center of excellence in Kiev, mostly like R&D AI focused. And that was mostly like state of things on my side before the full-scale invasion. And my contract actually was about to finish in late 2021, and my plan was to take a break from business and like activities and just focus on some other stuff, in particular on the research in the field of AI. But then when the full-scale invasion started, of course, it changed the plan heavily, and that's how Osavul was born. So basically, it was the response of myself, of my partner, of the team of people who were ready to dedicate themselves to do something helpful. And starting from March 2022, more or less, we started to seek for the cases, for the use cases where our knowledge, our expertise can be helpful and beneficial to Ukraine as a whole and to different governmental bodies to be more effective in the resilience and countering the invasion. And the invasion and generally the war has been happening on multiple battlegrounds, right? Everyone knows about the on the ground battleground or the air battleground or the sea battleground. But of course, as well, this is a war that happens in the cyber and the info space. And to us, it seemed like the most relevant thing, the best fit to our expertise was indeed this info in cyber aspect of the war. So we decided to focus our efforts there and started to build a software which evolved to a platform and evolved towards Osavul today, which helps defend against information attacks, influence operations, disinformation campaigns, and stuff like that, which are very, very active these days on the Russia-Ukraine war.
That's a great mission you have. I think that I was very impressed to see that it was done and that you're helping so much to Ukraine in this war, like in this war defense and resistance against that horrible invasion.
Yeah, I would just add that it started like this and it keeps being like that because the war is still ongoing. And so we are still actively working with the government. We are engaged in many activities. But at the same time, what we realized pretty soon is that this disinfo stuff is not just a government or war related thing. It's something much broader. It goes beyond Ukraine and Russia. It's a global problem basically. And it's a problem not just of governments, it's a problem of everyone, of citizens, of society, of companies, and especially public companies, and everyone. So everyone can be exposed to the disinfo or to influence operation, as a broader term, and everyone can be a victim of that. That's why we see our mission, of course, as Ukrainians, to help Ukraine win, obviously, but then broader as a company, we want to tackle these problematic issues of disinfo and try to prevent the consequences of that, reduce the exposure, and help those who are fighting it do it more effectively.
I saw at your website that you work with businesses, governments, and civil societies. What sort of work do you do with each of those kind of type of your customers? Maybe you can share more. What are the specific problems they have and so on?
It's interestingly different stakeholders of this problem. So I would call business and civil society and governments, they are different actors playing in the same field, right? Because the info space is shared. We all live in the same internet. So they, even though they're different, the problems they face are pretty similar. And when we're talking about the information security, normally the cycle of things that you do here on the defense side is pretty standard. So first you need to identify what's going on and identify active threats or possible threats that are dangerous or likely to be dangerous. That will be the first step. Then on the second step, you need to assess those threats and understand first how real they are. Is it big or not? Is it even like a real threat, or is it just a seemingly big problem? You want to understand who is involved. You want to understand what are the possible consequences, what kind of impact can it have on your assets or on your nation if you're a country, or whatever is your strategic interest. And then you need to craft your response. And then once you release this response, you need to measure the effectiveness of the response and understand if you were good or bad at your acting, and then maybe adjust. So that's like a workflow that you're going to follow. And it doesn't really matter if you're like a government or a corporation or a NGO. You would probably stick more or less to this workflow because it's like pretty unifying. And inside this workflow, we help with the first two steps mainly. So we help you identify the problems. We help you assess those problems so you can better craft your response. It can be different things, but we help you understand what should you do, and then you act. And your action is usually some kind of a real world action. So it's not something that we can help you automate because it's something that you actually do. It can be a lot of things, really. It can be a communication or a series of communications. It can be some kind of legislation. It can be some kind of policy making, and so on and so forth. But in order to be able to do that and to execute, first you need to have the awareness of what's happening in the information environment, and you need to be able to map it to the kind of to do the risk assessment and to understand how important is it and why.
Got it. It's interesting talking about threats. I read on your website you're kind of have this messaging about free and democratic societies. And I am curious, what are the main threats that you noticed while working on Osavul, while working on all those threats with the government? What is actually threatening the free and democratic societies? What are those things, in your opinion?
I think the main threat, or we better word it as vulnerability of the democratic society, is the fact that it's democratic itself. Because if we are a democratic society or a global, like a democratic West, what makes us strong is that we are an open society, which means that we have an open information environment. Everyone can enter. We have a culture of discussion, public pluralism of opinions, right? Many opinions can coexist. So that's what makes us strong. At the same time, it's what makes us vulnerable to information attacks and influence operations, because anyone can enter this environment. Let's say we have Facebook or we have Twitter. Anyone can, be it a Russian or Chinese or Iranian malicious actor. He can enter our environment. He can throw something in, and we'll have to deal with it. We cannot do the same thing with the Chinese information environment or with Russian information environment because it's a closed loop, right? It's not open to the foreign interference, and it's much more controlled and much more organized. So our strength is also our weakness in this case, and what we are trying to do is to mitigate this weakness. And so what's happening in the information environment? We're all competing. We're all competing to promote the truth, to promote the healthy narrative against the malicious actors who are also present there and are super active, and sometimes are very effective as well, because they're trying to find those special, places, some buttons to push that can actually destabilize the society. And the main strategy that is being applied by Russians, but not only, it's generally a very effective strategy, is not to push for a particular narrative or a particular story, but rather push for whatever you can that works to deunify people, right? To seed chaos instead of organization, and to see like disconnection instead of unity. And that's a strategy that most of the actors stick to. So they keep generating threat after threat, campaign after campaign, pushing on the specific buttons. In different societies, in different countries, it will be different buttons, and generating more and more chaos, mistrust among people, and using our own media against us. that would be like it's not a one particular threat, but it's more like a class of threats we are living with and we're trying to tackle.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a very interesting explanation. Actually, when this full-scale invasion started, because I wasn't like so involved into what Russia actually like doing or said so much, right? And my focus of interest, all my friends, I was like in a bubble, in a tech bubble. But then when I saw, right, all of those narratives, I was like thinking, oh, that would be good that someone would define those narratives and actually trace the source of them. And because you can clearly see they repeat themselves, right? So they kind of seed that narrative, and then they probably use a lot of I don't know, bots or just accounts, people to spread that. And it seems like you're doing something on that direction. Maybe you can share something, of course, only what you can share. How do you solve that problem of finding those narratives and tracing them?
Yeah, here's where AI comes very handy, and maybe that's something that's possible today, but was not possible like 5 years ago, technology-wise. And that's what makes us unique, is that yes, we are able to work with the content at scale and identify such subtle things as narratives, which are sometimes very abstract categories, right? It's not about searching something by keyword or trying to build a rule-based approach to say if it's this or that. It's a more subtle thing where you need to understand semantics of text and messages to be able to attribute it to this or that story. But we have this capability, and not only this, as you mentioned it and you noticed it, and it's very right that those campaigns or those narratives, sometimes campaigns are narrative based, sometimes they are simpler, but they are in many cases long term, and they have a particular pattern of distribution. So they start somewhere, they go somewhere else, then they, for instance, they put something on a Telegram channel, a pretty small one. Then out of Telegram, it expands to Twitter and being accelerated by a network of bots. Then New York Times sees it, and the New York Times posts an article, and it goes back to Telegram, reprinting this article, and so on and so forth. So it can be a long cycle, like a life cycle of this thing. And what's important is to understand the pattern, the distribution patterns, and the behavior involved to be able to say if it's organic or not that much organic. Because, again, when we're talking about the content, we can say, okay, this is narrative, A or B. The problematic part, the hard part, is to say if it's true or not. And we as a company, we don't put this responsibility on ourselves to distinguish true from not true. It's a very difficult and very deep philosophical question. No one can really tell, and no one wants to be this in a chair to decide what's true and what's not true. So we are trying to narrow down this complex problem to a simpler problem. We want to say, okay, if something is organic or not. Because if something is organic, if I truly believe that the earth is flat, that's like my constitutional right in many countries of this world to believe in whatever I like to believe. And I can post about this and there is no issue. Okay, I believe it, I post it, I don't harm anyone. That's like my right. Okay, but if I'm a foreign government doing a planned and coordinated activity in order to push a particular story and achieve my goals, that's a totally different story, right? And what is the difference between these two stories? The fact that it's coordinated, that's not organic, so it's inauthentic, and it can be ideally attributed to a particular malicious actor having the intent. And to do that, you need to understand, to analyze not just the content part, but also the distribution part. Understand who are the actors involved in pushing the narrative, how are they connected, can they be traced back to a particular center or coordinator, are the bots involved, and many questions like this. And that's a pretty important part, and we put a lot of efforts on this aspect to answer those questions and help our customers get these answers.
That's interesting. This is great. Yeah, I think AI is, well, that's a big thing here and everywhere right now. And this is great that you're using as much technology as you can, right, to solve basically real world problem which is happening right now. It's pretty impressive. Can you share a little bit more how businesses can use your product? Like what specific problems businesses might have and you help with?
Yeah, because businesses, they exist in the same information environment, as I mentioned before, they can also
Yeah.
be subject to influence operations and information attacks of the similar nature. The most vulnerable companies are the companies which are public, so their stock price is very volatile, and it depends a lot on the public opinion and on the things happening in the information environment. A recent example, pretty well known, was about the deep fake about explosions next to the Pentagon, next to the White House building in DC. So it was like a generative AI generated an image. Basically, it was distributed through Twitter, and of course, it was super easy to debunk, to understand it was not true. So it took a couple of hours to take it down and to convince everyone that's not the case. But during this period of time, the stock market responded almost instantly, and the index dropped, and many stocks dropped. And so some real people, they got real losses because of this. So someone shorted, someone lost their position, some real money were involved. And that's like the case that proves that even small in the information environment, they can have huge consequences on the financial market, on stocks, on company valuation, company price, and at the end of the day of the company business as a whole. That's why the product that we offer to enterprise is similar. So you want to identify the threats as soon as they pop up, and you want to understand how better to react on them, to assess them if they are real. If they are real, you should do something about it as soon as possible. You need to convince your executives that that's a real thing, and you need to do something about it. And that's like a valuable thing in this context. Additionally, what makes big enterprise companies unique here is that you need to take care not only of your risks, but also of the risks of all your supply chain. Like imagine you work with hundreds, maybe thousands of suppliers if you're a huge company, and all out of a sudden it gets known that, I don't know, one of your suppliers, you didn't know that, but now it's uncovered that he uses child labor somewhere, I don't know, in Cambodia or in China. And that becomes a huge story, and now your whole business is at risk, and it's a huge like legal exposure and reputational exposure just because this single fact is present. And you need to know about this, and you need to be able to mitigate the risk. You need to know about the risk. So the complexity of the problem grows with the number of actors involved. The more suppliers you have, the more assets you have, the more brands you have, the more cautious you should be.
Now, when I think about it, this is when literally time is money, right? So every minute this disinformation exists about your business, you kind of losing reputation, and as a result, you're losing your, as you said, like stock, or stock price is dropping or something like that. I didn't even think about it before you said, but now I'm thinking if I would have a company like that, I would definitely use your product. Let's talk a little bit about you. You already mentioned, like you started talking about your previous experience, that you had a company that was acquired and so on. What inspired you to start your own business? Maybe even the first one, right? When you just started being entrepreneur. And what was your experience, and how is maybe this experience different from the previous experience?
That's a cool question because I've been running companies. I've been entrepreneur for almost all of my life. I started fairly early. I was 18 when I founded my first company. It was not like a real company, but back then it seemed to be. And it's hard to say what was the main motivation. I think curiosity mostly. So the path of building career for 10 years before you found something seemed to be too lengthy. So I wanted to rush faster and get to that kind of experience and to learn interesting, fascinating things faster. I think that was the first thing. And secondly, because we started with the media, me and my partner, who built all the companies together, by the way. So it's been a long run together. But back then, we founded that first company because we haven't seen on the market anything, any place that we would like to work at. So we decided why not to build it ourselves, because it seemed like a nice concept. That was the first motivation, and then it started, and then it kept going. But of course, every next company was much more mature than the previous one. And I think this new venture we entered is, I would say, the most mature and the most difficult in terms of the market specifics. And now we're talking about the security market, working with very, very, serious and well-known, but also complex organizations, such as governments, such as international organizations, as EU or NATO. It's not easy. It's very interesting, but of course, it's a difficult challenge for us and for me personally.
Oh, that's interesting. Feels like you're an entrepreneur by a spirit. So it's just like when you started at 18. It's very inspiring to hear your story. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds cool. But with this startup, honestly, I didn't have any intention to found it before the full-scale invasion. So my plan was quite the opposite. My plan was to take a break. I thought, okay, my last startup got acquired, so it's been hell of a ride for 10 years from company to company to finally build something. We sell it, we accomplish our contract obligations, so we're free to go. And the plan was to take the rest, because entrepreneurship is pretty exhausting. You spend a lot of energy, and you want to have some time to recharge. But then it's more, this time, it's more about the mission than about the company itself. So it felt, I think for most people, it felt the same when the full-scale invasion started, that you cannot just ignore this reality. You cannot just sit back and relax, right? You want to do something, you want to be helpful. I think that was the main motivation here, that then grew and scaled up to the company.
Yeah, that's true. That sometimes you don't choose the purpose, but the purpose chooses you. So you have no choice. You have to just act.
It seems like that's the case now for many Ukrainians.
Yeah, true. And maybe, is there anything you're looking right now? Maybe you're hiring, or maybe you're looking for some collaboration of some sort. Maybe you can share, and maybe someone hear it.
Yeah, there are two types of things we are looking for. So first, we are hiring. We have two open positions now. One is a strategic position for us. We're looking for a senior AI engineer in the field of natural language processing, NLP, with experience with large language models, LLMs. Everyone's talking about them these days. So of course, we are also part of this process. So we really look for a strong guy or a girl. So we'll be grateful for referral, or for a person can just DM me or find a link somewhere in the description to this video, hopefully, and send his CV, his or her CV. That's number one. Number two, we are building partnerships now with individual researchers or research centers, because other than just building software, we also conduct researches in the field of disinformation, information security, and we are able to support both individual researchers and institutions with our technology arm to conduct better researches. So we see that as our kind of responsibility. We do some researches of ourselves. It would be great to collaborate with a bright mind, especially if the person already has the research agenda, and we can fit in and help make that research more effective, more loud, more data-driven. That would be awesome.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Great pleasure.